not just Continuum that can go and make these opportunities happen that we keyed up this morning, that Monty was talking about, opportunities in the short term, potential opportunities in the long term. It's not just Continuum Ag, and we're one little piece of this, but we wanted to bring up some of the other folks that we collaborate with who are just navigating this space with other folks out there. So what we've got here is we're going to start with Dana with one of the CPA firms, really working with farmers to actually create the tax credit, right? It's a tax credit. It's got to be created by a CPA firm and submitted to the IRS at the end of the day. Then Dane from Bushel, they do digital scale tickets. They're already very involved in data, transaction of grain, helping to get this data to link to the bushels, right? We're scoring just on the farm, but that data has to connect into the supply chain. So we'll have Bushel, and then we've got Paige coming. She's with a group that actually brokers tax credits, and they sell tax credits. She's an expert in that space. We're going to talk about how we actually monetize these things. Then Mark spoke here last year as well. Mark's with our third-party verifier called Eco Engineers, because this data that we're collecting on the farm, it's got to be verified, then it's got to connect into the supply chain, like with Bushel, then it's got to be able to create tax credits, then we can monetize it. But that's to tee things up. But Dana, you are somebody that you and I have been able to hang out a couple different times at conferences. Excited to have you here. But maybe introduce yourself here first. I'll let you have this because I think you've got a couple different slides and stuff, but I'll let you run it.
Okay.
Just a big old forward button.
Okay.
But introduce yourself. Thanks for coming all the way down from Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Yep.
But go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, thanks for having me, Mitch. I'm excited to be here. I feel like I'm home again. I graduated from a university down the road here, which I hesitate to mention because I'm guessing there's more Cyclone fans in this room than Hawkeye fans. But all jokes aside, growing up in a farming community in Northwest Iowa, I am very passionate about the work that I do in the agriculture and biofuel space. So I'm very happy to be here and excited for this conversation. I wanted to just, give you an overview of the firm that I work for. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but some of you may not be familiar with RSM. So I am a tax partner at RSM, and I've been with the firm for almost 20 years now. And I lead our firm's federal credits and incentives practice. So I focus 100% of my time on getting federal tax credits for clients in the clean fuel space. So I work with a lot of ethanol plants. We're starting to work with some SAF companies. We have biodiesel, biogas, RNG developers, and we're starting to work with some hydrogen. So it's a really exciting time to be in this space. And so RSM, you can see a little snapshot up here. We're the 5th largest firm in the nation. We have offices all over the country and the globe. Fun fact, we started in Cedar Rapids almost 100 years ago. A guy named Ira B. McGladrey started our firm. So you may recognize the name McGladrey because that's what we were known as for up until about, 10, 12 years ago. And then we rebranded RSM to align with our international footprint, and that's the slide you can see up there. So even though we're global, we, especially in the U.S., we are very focused on serving clients in the middle market, which means that we work with closely held, more entrepreneurial type companies, and those are the clients that we're really passionate about serving. So 3 lines of business in our firm: consulting, tax, and audit. And when I mentioned that we work with a lot of ethanol companies, we're very active in this space. So if there's 200 plants in the country, we do work for probably 100 of those plants in one of these areas, maybe all 3, maybe just one, but we're definitely in the ethanol space. This is just a more detail about what is my relevancy on this panel and how does me and my team and RSM fit in to this whole discussion. So what we would do is, and I'm going to talk specifically related to 45Z or other credits in the Inflation Reduction Act. We would come in to an ethanol producer, for example. We would help them evaluate what credits they're eligible for, and then we would provide a high level assessment of that and recommended next steps. Then we would actually help them qualify and quantify the credit. So we would determine how much credit are they eligible for based on their activities, investments, et cetera. And we would qualify that credit by helping them determine what type of documentation they need to substantiate that tax credit and be able to monetize it. And that usually includes issuing a tax opinion letter. And so we're basically like a third-party verifier in a way where we are attesting to that client's eligibility for the credit so that they can either put that on their tax return and if it's an LLC, for example, pass it out to their members, or as my co-panelist Paige will talk about in a little bit, they may want to sell that credit out into the market, and our tax opinion would be part of the documentation that's required for that sale.
And so I think about this too. I think I just lost. Oh, there we go. We're back. So it's creating that opinion letter is really what's important, right? Saying here's the data, here's how many credits we've got. Now you can decide what to do with them. So I think that's really critical. What I wanted to jump in on. But there's lots of different places that do this, right? Like we participate in R&D tax credits for research and development. There's lots of different things in this category. It's not a new concept.
No, we've been doing tax opinions. I mean, we do that for a lot of different projects, but this is the being able to sell the credit out in the market is new in the federal tax world. There's only been one other credit that you can do that with, which are railroad credits. And so this is really new to everyone. And the tax opinion is what is very important if a taxpayer wants to go out and sell the credit. And then we would provide additional consulting along the way. We're getting lots of questions from our producer clients about, because they're getting questions from their farmers and members saying, okay, how are the farmers going to get paid? What do we need? What type of structure do we maybe need to set up to be able to get those dollars out to our farmers who are delivering, climate smart ag corn to us, or CSA corn? So we would help with consulting with those questions along the way as well. That's it for my slides. Do you want to talk any about 45Z and the new guidance that came out, or do you want to wait?
So maybe real quick, let's hit on that.
Okay.
So with 45Z, Dana and I were talking the other day that there was actually just some new guidance that just came out on Friday. Now, it didn't necessarily do anything for us on the farm, but it's a big deal for the actual biofuel producers. So they've got some action items that they have to hit on. But the point being, I'll let Dana explain what these recent rules were. But what's awesome is they're making some progress. This tax credit is due to start on January 1st. Mm-hmm. We've been joking. Question number one, right? When are we going to get the rules?
Yep.
Nobody knows. But hey, at least we just got some guidance on Friday. Didn't do anything to us on the farm, but it at least is progress forward. Maybe speak to what action did they announce on Friday?
Yeah, sure. So the guidance that came out Friday morning was more related to a compliance requirement. So the plants will have to submit a form to the IRS, and it's called an excise tax registration. But they need to file this form and have it approved by the IRS if they want to start claiming this credit on 1/1/25. So the signed approval has to be in the producer's hands before they can start claiming this credit. And so we are recommending to our clients to get these forms in, even if they don't know for sure if they're going to qualify for 45Z, and no one knows for sure because we don't have the guidance. So as Monty talked about earlier, you can, say, oh, this is my CI score according to GREET, but we don't know what that looks like specifically for 45Z. We did get some information in that notice that came out Friday where they are talking about low greenhouse gas ethanol being a potential clean fuel for 45Z. They also mention biodiesel, they mention renewable natural gas. And then there's an appendix in the notice that actually goes through the feedstocks that may be eligible feedstocks for purposes of producing clean fuel. And they do call out corn kernel fiber ethanol, and they do mention, crops from starch and sugar. So you think just your regular corn-based ethanol. So we did get some additional information there, but what we're waiting for is the guidance that's going to tell us how to calculate your CI score to determine if you're at that 50 or below.
No, that's great. And Dana, I appreciate you being here. We'll get into more questions. They're pouring in already. So be sure to put your questions in. But the key thing here, we are making some momentum, right? We don't have all the rules. We don't know when we're going to get them, but at least they're thinking about us. So that's good. But anyway, thanks, Dana, for being here. We're going to bring up Dane here next, speaking on the agricultural data and how do we actually get this connected in to these grain buyers and stuff. But Dane, appreciate you coming down. Maybe introduce yourself and Bushel overall.
Well, thanks, Mitch, and good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a great day so far. I know I am. So I'm Dane Braun. I'm originally from a farm in Wheaton, Minnesota. You've probably never heard of it. It's the least populated county in the whole state of Minnesota, so you probably haven't heard of it. But it's at I can be in all 3 states, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota, in 10 minutes. So to give you a context, it's where we operate. Another fun fact about my area where I grew up is it's actually on the continental divide. So water flows north there, which growing up I thought water always flowed north until I, learned a little bit more that no, water goes south, right? But kind of a crazy operation there. Grew up on a farm though, corn, soybeans, sugar beets. We got out of the hog business. Brad was growing the big hogs. We started growing big beets in the 80s. So that was our goal. But still do a lot of corn, soybeans, and non-GMO beans that get exported to Asia today. I work for a company, Bushel. We're headquartered in Fargo, North Dakota. We are a software solution company that builds automated tools for agribusinesses so they can automate different workflows from grain and bid management to payments to a customer portal and a commercial portal. And then we also have a product called Bushel Farm, which is a farm management software. Some of you may have heard of it. Historically, it was called Farm Logs. We acquired that company in 2021, rebranded it to Bushel Farm. That's a farm management software. It helps build P&L reports for farmers, track their activities, and also build grain marketing plans out there. Yeah,
and maybe speak a little to, like I was saying, getting this data into the supply chain. So how are you guys approaching that? And maybe speak to like some of the traceability, transparency stuff that you guys are already involved in, whether it be CI, but really beyond that too. It's not just for biofuel. There's lots of things you guys have been involved in.
Yeah, great question. So at scale, we have about 100,000 farmers using our product every month. And so we have quite a big reach. And what we're able to track is actually the scale ticket deliveries of those farmers. So, and the contracts as well. So we have the deliveries from point A to the grain elevator or the ethanol plant. And we also are able to track the grain from the elevator to the ethanol plant, which is super interesting. And there's some problems to be solved just there today without carbon, moisture problems, tracking down lost grain. So what we think though is we can help attach attributes like the CI score into the supply chain. We have the data on the actual deliveries, the qualities, moisture, test weight, aflatoxin, all these things. Let's just pop a CI score on there. And now, working with you guys, we can do that, right?
That's exactly it, right? So it's being able to figure out, okay, we can create these scores, whatever, on the farm. We can adjust what the score is going to be as we get more guidance. And we also don't know 100% yet what traceability requirements are going to be needed. But that's what's great is you guys already have the infrastructure to do it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel.
No.
But maybe speak to there are a lot of other markets doing this. I don't know if you have an example one or anything like that of you've already been doing this stuff.
I mentioned we grow some non-GMO or food grade soybeans, they like to call them, and they get exported to Asia. We're doing a program locally where a company is doing the same thing. They want to trace the grain from the field into the bin and then into the delivery point, and so they can put it in a container and the customer in Asia can track it all the way back to that field. And they also want to be able to track the activities done. So what chemicals have been applied, and there's different dates on when things can be applied before harvest. And so we're already tracing in that program, and it's very effective. So.
No, that's great. And I think makes a ton of sense for where the puck is going here. We'll dig into it a little bit more, but why don't we keep moving on here for this section? I'll bring up Paige, and then we'll get brought back around. And like I was getting at, right, I'm trying to think through how do we put together all these pieces, right, from the farm data where where Continuum Ag's roots really are, to now it's got to go to, in a lot of cases, the elevator, which like what they're talking, not just to the ethanol plant. Paige, come on up. But that traceability, I think, is going to be really critical. We don't know all the details yet, like I said, but we know that we've got to get this data into the supply chain somehow. And overall, we got to take all this data, and after we verify that it's legit, now we got to monetize it. And so, Paige, that's why I'm excited to have you come in and explain that. But maybe tell us about your company, just from a high level. I'll let you have this as well, because you've got a couple other slides as well that you can click through. But yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah. My name is Paige Hilbrands, and I work for Mickelson and Company, which is based out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And Mickelson and Company got its start in about 2005 with the very first transferable tax credit that Dana mentioned, which is with railroads. So Class 2 and Class 3 railroads benefit from this tax credit, and the way it works is for every dollar a railroad spends on its maintenance of way, the government gives it back, gives a tax credit back in the form of 40 cents on the dollar. And a lot of these Class 2 and Class 3 railroads can't benefit from the tax credit because they're mom and pop shops. So our founder, Mark Mickelson, helps transfer those tax credits for them for about 85 to 97 cents on the dollar due to a bunch of different variables. And so when the Inflation Reduction Act came out in 2022, we thought this would be a really good market for us to go into because of our large buyer base that we have generated through the railroad tax credits. And yeah, so that's kind of our company. So a high-level overview of how a tax credit sale works is the ethanol plants will generate these tax credits with their low carbon intensity score. And we've talked a lot about the economics today and how that all works. And then we will connect the tax credit seller with a buyer of these tax credits who will then purchase it for about 90 to 94 cents on the dollar is what we've been seeing with the Section 48 investment tax credits. And so this will just gear us up well for the 45Z tax credits.
Maybe a quick follow-up question on that. So you've mentioned, kind of the spread of the value. Maybe any quick indication on what determines what that value actually is? Like what's kind of behind that range?
Yeah, that's a good question. A bunch of different variables are behind the range. Right now, we're currently selling 2023 investment tax credits, and just as it's now June already and a bunch of payments have already been made for the 2023, or some people are completed with their tax return, that's why some of the pricing is getting lowered, just because, the market is kind of used up and not as many tax credits are necessary. So the faster we're able to market the tax credits and get them moving, the better pricing is probably
because some of the companies don't want to necessarily have to go back through the task of refiling their taxes.
Correct.
And just messing with it for
Yep.
maybe a little bit of tax credit.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep. Other variables are the tax opinion, as Dana mentioned. If there's a good tax opinion in place and good insurance pricing, that all affects the pricing too that we see. So some value that Mitco adds in this space is the most obvious one. We connect the buyer to the seller and make sure that you are getting the best pricing for the tax credit generated. We also are a firm made up of a bunch of different lawyers and CPAs, and so we help with indemnities and drafting the transfer agreement and the indication of interest and term sheets and all those legal jargon words. So, yeah.
Random question here, but how long would the typical process be? Like if a company wants to sell some tax credits, how long is it going to be to like go through that whole process you were just talking about?
That's a good question, and it kind of depends what is set up, if there's already a tax opinion in place, if there's already insurance kind of lined up. Otherwise, we try and time it with quarterly payments for our buyers, just so they can get the best return on investment. And so it can be done in a month or less. Sometimes it takes longer, just depending on when the parties want to close based on their estimated
Okay,
tax
but it
payments.
can go fairly quick. It's not a 6 months or a full year process if
Right.
you've got your ducks in a row.
Yep.
Got
Yeah,
it.
precisely.
Anything? Do you have another one or two? Oh yeah, here we go.
I have the economics, but I feel like we've kind of talked through those quite a bit.
That was the
today
question
already.
for Dana. How much is this all going to be worth, right? But no, maybe yeah, we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but maybe give your kind of take on it would be good.
Yeah, sure. So we've talked about the baseline CI score being in the money of below a 50. So I just kind of put together some fake economics of how that would result in a tax credit that we would then help to monetize. But if an ethanol plant CI score is 45, then they would have 5 points of CI score that are in the money. And we've talked that the credit is 2 cents per gallon per CI point lowered. So that would be 10 points of reduction, or 10 cents that they would receive in the form of a tax credit. And if the ethanol plant produces 35 million gallons of ethanol in the year, that would be a $3.5 million 45Z tax credit, which then we could help sell for 90 to 94 cents.
Yeah, great. And obviously there's just some in general
Numbers and stuff here, and that's why it's so hard to like answer the question on what exactly is this going to be worth, because every single plant is starting from a different score. Every single one is going to be able to take these in a different manner.
Maybe one last quick follow-up, and whether it be to you or maybe we ask Dana here in a little bit, but every single ethanol company is going to handle the credit different. Are you guys doing consulting and stuff with them to figure out, like, do they get passed along to the farmer? What if the company's an LLC? What if they're a corp? What if, like, all these different structures are going to take things different? Is that something you guys get involved in, or
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, we more stick to the monetization process of it, but we also want the farmer to get paid and help. We would love to consult in any way possible.
No, great. Well, excited to continue to dig into it, and excited to have you guys here. I mean, the money's got to, because this isn't a direct payment from the government. Like, it's not a refund that they get. You've got to monetize these somehow, and I think what you guys are doing is really critical, and hopefully it keeps working out the way that we need. But I appreciate you coming all the way down and taking the time. Unless you got anything else, we'll get Mark up here.
Perfect.
But anyway, cool. Thanks.
Mitch, one quick comment. I didn't mention this in my section. So that, in Paige's example, that $3.5 million that's going to, the credit that's going to the ethanol plant. So let's say, they sell it for 92 cents on the dollar, whatever the math is, those proceeds to the plant are actually tax-free. So then if they take that cash and distribute it out to their members, it's a non-taxable event. And the purchaser of the tax credit, it's a non-deductible expense to them. So
I've got a follow-up question on that a little bit, on how that ties to the farmer side and the buy piece.
I think we were talking about it just briefly the other day, but we'll follow up on that. Mark, you're a repeat up on the stage, and one of the most local guys here. We recently signed a deal with Eco Engineers that they are our primary verifier. There's a variety of them. We'll see. There's some rules in other places of like you got to mix it up and things like that. But Eco's been really great to work with here. Where I'm going to dig into some of our process a little bit more. Maybe you'll hit on some of that. I'll let you have that too, Mark. But give your quick intro and stuff here to start. Obviously, you're wearing a lot of different hats, and then we'll jump into the verification process.
Yeah. So thank you, number one, for having Eco here. I'm 30 minutes from here. I family farm, but I've seen so many familiar faces in the audience that I grew up. I was a commodity manager here at Gringer's in Iowa City. And so I actually went to school with Brian. So if anybody wants any dirt, let me reach out. Anyhow, really, it's Eco Engineers is a third-party verifier. We're also consultants in this space. So there is hats that you have to wear. And if we are an auditor or verifier, Mitchell kind of gets after me sometimes because I can't give him all the answers and tell him how the audits are going to be. And so it's a really cool thing. And what that does is it adds integrity to the space. These third-party verifiers are going to be asked to do some things that the industry hasn't done or hasn't seen before. And so if I can, I'm going to talk a little bit about this slide.
Go for it.
So our job and our role, this is the industry of what I grew up in. And it's up on the right-hand side or the left-hand side of this. Ethanol facilities, processors took your grain and they took it for granted that everything that you're doing about that, you could do whatever you wanted with it on the other side, right? And it was really a case that they already know that the farmer's doing their very best to raise the best product that they can, the most sustainable. And so what's really cool about this is Secretary of Treasury saying, break down that wall. There's now a discovery process that's going to take place. And that discovery process is going to maybe invade some people's privacy a little bit more than what they're used to. Who do they share their information with, right? And so that's part of this whole process that's going to be really cool, is the sharing of that information so that you can be shared these tax credits and compensated for it.
Well, it's always just been yellow number 2 corn, right? And what I talk a lot about at conferences and stuff is there's always only been one scoreboard in agriculture. The yield monitor. We are pretty darn good at scoring points on that scoreboard with growing big bushels, right? And Monty talked about that and how we're continuing to improve production. And we've always gotten paid only for that one metric, the bushel. Now, for the first time, there might be a new scoreboard. Might be a CI score, might be something different, but there's a new scoreboard. And at this point, we're looking at that GREET model as the scoring system, right? How do we score points? And like what we're getting at, pending some of these rules, this might really be the first time where you can actually get paid for scoring points other than just yield.
Yeah, and it's not just about, and I know our main message today is the CI, right? But it's also the aggregation of those attributes, and it's down to the minute level of the practices that you guys are doing. Those attributes are important to other people. There's communities looking at water quality. So monetizing all your efforts, that's those other commodities that you're out here. You produce corn on one side, but you got water quality. You got an environmental. You got a species act that is playing into this. So those are really cool things. Iowa Soybean Association, Iowa Corn. There's a lot of effort that's all pulling this together and being parts of Iowa Renewable Fuels. All these things are happening. And your end user has the ability today, and combining with the USDA to really pull this all together.
Yeah, so 45Z might be one outcome that says, wait, we want those attributes and here's a way to monetize it. But there's lots of other things that are out there too. And we've talked about a bunch of them and trying to figure out, all right, what should we bring to our farmers? And should we look at European standards like ISCC? Should we be looking at the standards up in Canada for their markets? Or we was just on a meeting the other day that in the proposed LCFS market in Illinois, they're looking at scope 3 reductions and on-farm GREET scoring for the Illinois state LCFS market. So lots of things on the horizon that's pushing like, all right, hey, let's get this figured out. And hopefully it happens sooner rather than later.
This is a fun space, and agriculture really is is the solution. And with integrity, with discipline, we've got the ability to do that. As a farmer, get ready. Get ready to be, hey, what is it that I need to share, right? That's really part of it. As a processor, as a facility, or even as an organization, try to really dig into it and demand so that how can I collaborate with somebody to pull this information? Mitchell's talked about collaboration. Monty talked about collaboration. I think everybody's really seeing it. So.
Okay, hit on this because this is great. We got some of the 40B rules out, and we got to clarify that 40B is only for sustainable aviation fuel, and it's only a 2-year deal. But it gave some great indication as to what's to come, especially on the verification and the language around definitions of this stuff. But go ahead here, Mark.
So, and I really want to emphasize 40B and all of these are tax credits, right? It's the IRS. Our space, traditionally, as a third-party verifier, is in LCA, validation, farm practices, and all that stuff. So some of this, I don't want to get over my skis because I know Dana and the folks at RSM are going to have all kinds of good information in this space. But my hope, or at least what I expect, is this could be a phased-in process. We are clear on one side of this where no information is being shared. Now all of a sudden we're being asked to share it. So how do we get there? We've got the technology. Monty talked about 40B. There were 3 things that you have to do, and you have to do all 3 of them in order to get paid. I hope I hope that our legislators and people recognize that we have the ability to prove that we can do so much more. And that's where, platforms that Bushel has, it's the platforms that Mitchell's putting together, has that. And so it's all of us coming together to really pull the levers the right way.
Last things here, and I want to get over to our panel. But yeah, Monty was talking about that in the 40B rules, they came out with this concept of climate smart ag, pilot project farmer, something. It was like 8 words long. But basically it said in order to qualify the farming practices, you have to do cover crop, no-till, and use nitrogen stabilizers or enhanced efficiency fertilizers. If they do that, it's 10 CI points of reduction, 10 CI points of reduction on the bushel. 10 CI points times 2 cents per point is 20 cents a gallon. And when you look at like Monty's math, like he was saying, the easy math here of 3 gallons of ethanol per bushel, that means 10 CI points of reduction equals about 60 cents a bushel for all 3 of those practices, and 60 cents a bushel total. The farmer would only get a little piece of that. And today, as we know, not that many farmers are doing cover crop, no-till, and nitrogen stabilizers on at least 50% of the nitrogen on their corn crop. It'd be a very small amount of farmers that would qualify. What we're pushing forward on is, okay, if we have to verify just those practices, we'll be ready. But let's do the full thing. Let's document all of our stuff, keep it verified. And what was interesting, I think, is some of these standards that you guys are helping us through, these ISO standards. There's some rigor out there about how we have to document all this stuff. Maybe final kind of thoughts on that data and how do we kind of get ourselves ready for whatever the opportunity is going to be.
So there are ISO standards, our international standards organizations that set the rules and say, here's your methodologies that you have to write. We're asking for that methodology. So some of that today, in order to prepare for this, we're in the space of helping to really understand the work that's happening on the tax side of it, and all of these using 40B as these examples. We don't know all that methodology today, but we play in this space. We're an ISO 14064, 65 accredited auditors. And we know those rules. We know ISCC. We know all of the rules that are out here. We're waiting on the 45Z. Yeah. So we got to build this so that it's all up to the standards that, before you can say I'm a sustainable person, right? Or I'm sustainably farming this. And the proof is there. But now because we're adding monetization to it and real dollars, you're going to have to prove it, you're going to be held accountable for it, and you need to make sure that there's not the double counting and all those things take place.
Yeah, that's great.
Getting way into it.
No, I appreciate it, Mark. Let's swap over here. Yeah, okay, yeah, just leave it on that, leave it on the podium here if you would, Mark. So, okay, if you've got questions, I've got them pouring in. I'm going to try to crank through. I don't know how much time we have, but we'll crank through here, get to as many of these as we can. But if you've got questions, be sure to put them in. It's on your podium there. But Dana, let's hit on the question we were talking about before. Starting off with okay, so how do you think this is going to work for farmers? And then one of the follow-up questions on that being, is this any payment to the farmer, is that going to be taxed? Because you were talking about after the tax credits get resold, that's after tax, but up front, would this be a taxable event for the farmer up front?
It depends. So if there's a few different options here. So the ethanol producer, let's say they generate a $30 million 45Z credit, and I'm not going to start, we'll just say it's $30 million, and they're organized as an LLC. One option is they can pass that $30 million out to their members and as a tax credit. But then that goes, let's say there's a farmer member, that goes to the farmer. That farmer has to have enough taxable income to utilize that credit. It's not a refundable credit. They can carry it forward, but they would have to have enough taxable income. So that's one option, and I will tell you that's not the ideal option, and most of our ethanol producer clients are not going to do that. So then let's say they sell the credit for cash, then they would they would get the cash, they would, and just for ease of example, let's just say they sell it for 100%. So they sell it for $30 million. They get the $30 million in cash, then they distribute that out to their members in the form of a cash payment. That is a non-taxable event, and the farmer now has cash versus a tax credit that they may not be able to use. But then we've had questions about, well, how should we pay the farmers a premium for their corn if they have CSA practices, they're delivering low carbon corn to us? If that is the case, and that's how they want to monetize, the 45Z credit to their farmers via a premium on the corn, that is going to be taxable to the farmer. So if they're getting paid an increased amount for their corn that they're delivering, that will be taxable.
Which that makes sense, right? I mean, you're just selling a value-add product, just like if you're selling an organic corn crop, you're getting more money in, more taxable income, same type of concept here.
Right.
Not surprised.
And there's been questions from plants. So if we have some of our members deliver corn to us, are they going to figure out, they're going to break they're going to create maybe tiers of like preferred shares or something where the farmers who deliver the low carbon corn and they're a member of that ethanol plant, are they going to get more of that tax or more of that cash? And that goes to partnership law and amending operating agreements, and you have to be within the law and how you're going to distribute out the cash. So it does get a little complicated.
Lots of stuff there. Okay, I got a ton of questions. Let me just kind of crank through a bunch of them. Mark, the first one's probably best for you. With these subsidies, like in the biofuel space, there's already plenty of subsidies. We're talking here up to a max credit of $1 a gallon, but is that a big deal for these ethanol plants, or how much subsidy are they already getting, or what does that look like? Or do they even really get much of a subsidy anymore? I think some of that kind of phased out.
Subsidies today to ethanol facilities is pretty limited. It's really, it's going to the blenders, it's going to the, some of it even from an obligated party. Yes, there are credits, low carbon fuel standard programs, Minnesota, California, et cetera. But in order to do all that, it's passing through somebody who's bringing the value and adding that value. So in this case here, I mean, even in the case of a subsidy standpoint, right? Monty talked about how much grain there was, right? I remember and I'm going to date myself on this, but in 1987, I paid a farmer $1.27 for corn. It was, and he stored that corn for 3 years. It was part of a government reserve program. Those programs paid that storage, et cetera. So what we're doing in this case here is we're trying to incentivize climate smart ag. We're trying to incentivize good soil health practices and having it so that people who bring value can be compensated. It still goes through, right? It's still measured at the end user level.
And Dane, maybe do you speak to that a little bit on like any conversation with your customers as to how they do think they're going to collaborate with farmers, and also a question in here too of, are any of your folks talking about using the CI score outside of an ethanol market as well, or maybe using this concept beyond these tax credits?
I think it's all over the board on how they think they're going to incentivize farmers to do this. I think that is the biggest challenge we have is trying to understand that. And we have seen a little bit of interest outside of ethanol for CI. I did talk about the program in the food grade, similar sense there. They want to know more attributes on the product that's being delivered and shipped over to Asia in this case. So we have seen some interest there, and then certain state programs as well.
Maybe a variety of options. Go ahead, Mark.
One thing to add, and what's really cool about this, you talk about the subsidies. The Climate Smart Ag programs are put in place to incentivize the farmer to do the practice, right?
Yeah.
And get that started. On the other side of it then, they're incentivizing the industry to adapt these Climate Smart Ag practices and include it all in the supply chain.
Yeah.
Key component.
And so Paige, and on that, I mean, as you're talking about brokering these things out, what are those conversations looking like? Is that really ramped up now? Because it feels like, it's going to take a while before these tax credits are there, but maybe what are the conversations happening now? And are there things that we should be doing on the farm to address, I'm assuming there's some concerns probably from some of the buyers that are looking at maybe buying some of these credits. Number one, of course, we don't even have the rules and the credits don't exist today, but how do we alleviate some of the concerns that I'm assuming are already happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's why we really want to stress documenting the CI score, or just documenting all the practices and making sure it's verified, because there's so much risk involved with these transactions. And the buyers, the tax opinion really helps the buyers get comfortable with the tax credit. But also, just through more documentation and verification, we can help with all these transactions require insurance, and so the more documentation around it, the more insurance companies like it, and the better premium.
That's really good, and we've been chatting with some of the insurance companies and stuff too on, revenue protection insurance, but also insurance behind these credits and stuff, which is not a new concept either, but it's the rigor in the data. It sounds like that's going to alleviate their risk and alleviate their concern and help them to go about this. All right, we're running out of time. I want to keep cranking through though until we get kicked off. So, Dana, one of the things that I want to have you clarify, we've talked about it's 2 cents per point per gallon, but technically it's up to 2 cents per point per gallon because of meeting registered apprenticeship, prevailing wage, and now there's more red tape. Maybe speak to some of the red tape that you guys are helping the ethanol plants to overcome, and are we on pace to be okay in that space, or do you have any concerns, I guess, of some of the red tape?
So the way that the credits in the IRA work, which is, again, a new concept in the federal tax world, there's bonus credit amounts, there's base credit amounts, and then you get bonus amounts for meeting certain labor requirements. So Mitch referred to prevailing wage and apprenticeship, which basically means that you have to be paying certain wage amounts and have so many apprentice hours if you are constructing a clean fuel facility. Well, if you have already placed that facility in service prior to 1/1 of 25, which all of our ethanol plants are, they're grandfathered into those rules. However, once they're taking 45Z, if they have alterations, upgrades, certain repairs to the facility, they're going to have to follow those rules. So they're going to have to make sure that they're paying prevailing wages and that they have enough apprenticeship hours on a project like that. And that applies to their contractors and subcontractors that are working on those projects. When you're in a small rural community, it's going to be a little bit challenging to have certified apprentices doing some of this work. So we're having those conversations with our clients to make sure that they're prepared so they don't lose the tax credit because of an issue where they weren't paying their employees enough.
Yeah. So a lot of different red tape. One of the questions here is and Dan, I'll keep it with you. The question is when you see USDA getting more involved in some of the process that we're talking about here, and we were talking to about the White House just getting involved in carbon in general. Maybe speak to some of that.
Yeah, and we were just talking, Mark, about that, the request for information that came out for the USDA, and like the voluntary market, carbon market, which was discussed earlier today, has always been the wild, wild west. There's no regulatory body that was overseeing it. There was really no compliance requirements. It was more of an emotional decision, like Microsoft, Amazon, do they like this project up here where this ethanol plant is capturing carbon and sequestering it? Great, we're gonna buy your carbon credits. But now the White House just came out last week with a statement about creating some guardrails around this and making sure that we have some responsibility here with not only the folks selling the carbon credits, but those buying it. What are you buying? Is what you're buying actually reducing greenhouse gas emissions? And, is the seller, is that project a legit project and so forth? So I think anytime, especially with these tax credits, the IRS is going to look to agencies that already have been through this, like California, Oregon, the USDA, the DOE. They're going to consult with those agencies to give them the best information possible to make the rules.
And one of those things, it sounds like we're going to have some opportunity to provide some feedback and stuff too, right? As these rules get rolled out there. That was one of the things that I really wanted to put a plug out there for today. Obviously, we're going to continue to monitor this space very closely. I'm sure we will lead a letter and invite you all to do the same and being able to voice your opinions. That going to be kind of an opportunity that we've got ahead that with 40B, they basically said, here's the rules, like take it or leave it.
But
45Z, there's some feedback to be had.
Right, and with 40B, they're already, because of 40B, your Renewable Fuels Association, Growth Energy, all the industry trade organizations are lobbying hard right now to say we can't have these bundled practices. We have to separate them for 45Z. We need to give, credit where credit is due and not have it just be all or nothing. So they're lobbying right now. Then when the 45Z guidelines come out, they'll be in the form of proposed regulations, and there will be a comment period to comment back on those regs.
And some of what I've seen is if they are to get these rules out by January 1, which in my opinion is looking bleak, right? But if they are to do that and have the final rules verified before January 1, that means that they've got to get those initial rules out.
Yeah.
I'd seen August. I don't know if you have a take on
Well,
that but it's all hypothetical, obviously.
Right. And my colleague who's here with me from our Washington National Tax Practice, so she's out in DC, and we were joking earlier because we could have proposed regs forever. They may not ever be finalized. They may issue them proposed, and then the tax credit goes for 3 years. We get new administration that's not extended, and then they never actually get finalized.
Mitchell, you said something I think is really important. Everybody here has a voice, right?
Yeah.
And from a farm perspective, they want to hear that farm perspective of what's it going to take to really make it so that it's easy for the farmer to report, but it has the complexity so that the details are there and the overlap of the programs can be counted. So if you're in a voluntary program, how's it related to the 45Z? All of those things are going to play into this. So.
We don't know yet if an ethanol plant is selling into the LCFS market, they're getting D3 RINs for their corn kernel fiber. Are they going to be able to stack those programs with 45Z? We don't know at this point.
And that's why, so many of those things that still have to go, but at least, we have a voice, and at least there's some progress going, and that's why I'm excited to keep working with you guys. I'm going to let you each have the final kind of takeaway and stuff here too, but we do have that story to tell, and one of the questions was, how low can a score go? And on average, like we said, we've scored right about 300 million bushels. Average score is an 11.2, but we're going to hear from Ryan Oberman this afternoon. His corn last year was a negative 15.2. And I've seen some lower than that. Mark, you're right about there, like negative 10 or something like that, as we've talked about. It's like you can get really low scores, and we're doing a great job, but we got to be able to tell that story. But Dana, any final kind of comments from you on what else would you like, or any final kind of words for the folks here?
I'll just harp on the documentation. We don't have guidance yet, but if we're, as a farmer, and you're documenting your practices, that's just, when we do get the guidance, regardless of what we get, it's just gonna, I think, help, make it a smoother process to get everything verified and determine if the producer is eligible for the tax credit.
Sorry, Dane, she took documentation.
That's okay.
So
I'm gonna double down on that. Yeah.
But
No.
any final takeaways on your side here?
Don't procrastinate. Start documenting today, yesterday probably, and find a trusted partner advisor like Continuum, or maybe your ag retailer or your local agronomist. Find someone that's interested, educated, and can guide you through this process, and document.
Always gonna maybe one final follow-up on that too. With those ag retailers and the elevators and stuff, any message for them? Because I know plenty of those folks are represented here in the room too. Any take for those folks that are buying some of these bushels?
Yeah, well, also don't procrastinate either in creating a program. I think there's opportunities for an elevator to get involved. You don't have to be an ethanol plant here. There's a lot of ethanol plants purchase a lot of commercial grain, so get involved, talk to your local ethanol plants, talk to us about some of the solutions we can help in solving that and tracking the grain from the farm through the elevator to the ethanol plant.
That's great. Paige, any final remarks? Or are you going to say document?
Yeah, I was going to triple down on that too,
Okay.
but it's just been a fun market to be a part of. We have worked in railroads for so long, and those are pretty copy and paste, so it's just fun to be in this renewable part of the world and learning so much. And so I want to learn from everybody else as much as we can help them. And my coworker Molly and I will be walking around today, and available to talk.
And Mark, the guy with the company that actually has to look at all this data that we are documenting, what's your final kind of take besides, have really clean data, because your folks have to parse through all of it and audit and do all that heavy lifting.
Data collaboration, right? And that's really, this is a fun space. I started this umpteen years ago, 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I joined ECO for this reason. And the expertise of bringing it, what's the document that a farmer has to fill out that he can carry all the way to somebody to monetize this? And think about that. You're going to have to prove it. You're going to be questioned on it. Have you given that piece of paper to somebody else, or can you give it to that one person? So really, it's take the picture. If you planted something, if you did something, take the picture. Embrace the technology that can do this. Embrace the collaboration. Share it. You can be shared with.
I appreciate that. And so great to be able to work with these folks. As I've said, like, I'm learning all this stuff on the fly, and it's from working with these guys and others of like how I'm learning and trying to get that information to all of you. So join me in thanking this panel, and I'm sure they'll hang out and take questions too.